welcome to our meeting this September 23rd. I'll call the meeting to order at 9:32. And before I start on the formal agenda, some of you have your studies with Vera. It's my privilege, and I'm very happy to introduce and welcome our new clerk today. It's his first meeting. We're delighted to have James Sept join us from Cambridge. Former roles in the clerk's department, progressively goes to prepare himself for our role. So he's here with us now. James and his partner Brittany are happy to be moving closer to us in locally and big city life that James has in Cambridge. Experience, and it's also got roots in the rural community of Huron. So I think we've got a good fit between experience and roots and for us. So hope this is the first of lots of meetings, and I wish you success in experience here at the center. And so welcome all. Very happy to have you. So having said that now, I guess I have to get down to my mic.
Off.
Sorry, I didn't hear a word, did you? Do I have to repeat everything? I do. Okay.
Only if we want that beautiful presentation to be not lost.
Okay. Take two. It's horrible. It's the second time I've had to do that. Okay.
So I call the meeting order 9:32, and first order of business after that is to welcome our new employee, James, to the role of clerk. It's his first meeting with us today, and we're happy to have him here because we've had a vacancy and we've been wanting someone to fill that role really badly. His experience is with Cambridge, and in that role, he through various positions in the clerk's department, which prepared him for taking over our clerk's position. He is not just a big city person, Harkin from Huron County, and he and Brittany are looking forward to being here in our area very soon. Says that we're excited to have him here today, and looking forward to lots of future meetings with my. I did that. Two new have James here, and we want to wish you well and continue growth and success here in the centers. Welcome for everybody. Okay, now this meeting is also electronic COVID-19. We saw these closed, but members of the public will be and are invited to participate electronically by accessing the meeting, which is streamed on YouTube live, and the address for that can be found in the agenda on our website. There are no additions to the agenda, so I'll ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, then the first thing on our agenda today is the delegation of presentations, actually from our consultants, Airbus Consulting, and they're going to review the findings of our strategic plan surveys that have been ongoing over the last few months. So I think I'll be turning that over now to Bill and Marie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody hear me now?
We can't hear We can't hear him, can we? No, hang on a second.
The presentation, I see people are talking.
I'm not sure what that is. Okay.
No audio?
There we go. Is that okay?
Test, test, test.
Oh, that's great. Welcome, gentlemen?
Your worship, you are terribly garbled at my end. I'm only catching about every third or fourth word.
And I'm finding the same thing.
Okay. I have to speak directly toward you and not look at anyone. There's echo too. Is that better?
Marginally.
Oh, okay.
This one again.
Our technical person's looking into it. Just one second.
Tech support. Are you all able to see the slide?
Let's try again, Murray.
Test.
Sorry about this, folks. Sound coming there, so.
No joy with audio?
Can you hear me, Murray?
Clear as a bell.
Oh, yeah.
And you can hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful world of technology.
Testing, testing. Can you hear me
That's
now?
good. Hear you very well, loud and clear.
Excellent. Sorry for the delay. Welcome, gentlemen. We're excited to see that there are reports for us to review, and we're looking forward to hearing all of your information. I should turn it over to you now then, if you want to take it away, and we have our slides, so we're looking forward to this.
Thank you, Worship. Good to hear you clearly. Maybe just as a quick refresh, I'm Murray Clark.
I'm Bill Weingard.
Partner Bill Weingard is here. Just going to run through sort of a few preliminary slides to set the program for today and to review where we've been and where we're going and what we've learned. And so the purpose of the workshop, as you can see on the slide, is a review. Critically important to review the input from the surveys and the engagement meetings. Bill and I are going to tag team with the findings from the various engagement sessions and the surveys. And I think I should reinforce that at any point, if you have a question or a comment, then by all means, let's make this as inclusive as we can and productive as we can. The objective for today, this is the second workshop with all of council. You recall we met back on June the 24th, is at the end of our meeting, ideally to agree on a set of themes, and we've offered a list there for you. They may be placeholders, they may make their way through to the final product. And to extract from you a couple of issues under each theme to drill down and identify those couple of issues. It could be more. And use that then as our roadmap to begin to develop solutions. And as Bill keeps reminding me, it is our tendency, I think, to jump to find solutions to often complex problems when often we need a deeper understanding of the issues that underlie those challenges. And then we'll review next steps and the program right through to final completion. Everybody okay?
I don't see any hands here, so I think you can take it away.
All right, very good. Now, just to review the plan and the approach that Bill and I tend to follow, we take a fairly straightforward approach. The strategic plan is a public document. That's an important dimension. It will set out what you have been dealing with and what you intend to deal with. It will set out in very clear terms an action plan of a shopping list of achievables that will have timelines attached to those objectives, those action items. It's all about setting priorities and making choices among really a large array of inputs and challenges. It creates a set of expectations of you from the community and the stakeholders, and it's a roadmap for you for the near term, the midterm, and the longer term. You've seen these slides before, and again, we're just revisiting process here. The plan is all about doing something new, and really want to reinforce, and this was an important point to stress with the stakeholder groups, that the core services of the municipality, core services and programs and activities, of course, those will continue. What the aim of the strategic plan is to take a higher level, use a higher level lens. And as Bill describes it, let's look at the icing on the cake. We'll continue to serve the cake, but let's see how we can top it up with a number of meaningful value-added strategic initiatives. And again, to reinforce the approach that Bill and I take, this is your plan. It's the community plan, council's plan, and your staff complement. We're in a sense ghost writers, and we'll be, and we have been supporting the process, and we can offer suggestions. But this is your plan, it belongs to Middlesex Centre. And of course, it's all about setting priorities and making choices, as I referenced previously. And very much should be in action-oriented plans. And you'll recall way back when I talked about some of my earlier experiences when I was a green CAO, and a lot of trees were cut down and paper produced without a significant, meaningful product at the end. And we're going to touch on that last point, that we've learned a lot about Middlesex Centre, and it's an exciting municipality, not without challenges, of course, but there are a lot of good things happening in your municipality.
Okay, let me just quickly run through sort of where we are in the timetable here. What's life without a graphic? I know. There was a February in 2020, I'm led to believe, and that's when we began this project and met with the steering committee back in February, which seems like a decade ago, and set out, confirmed the work plan, started to talk about the stakeholder groups we were planning to meet with, and took it away from there, we thought. Well, then we arrived to June, I guess, and we're back in business, and had a chance, as Murray said, to meet with all of you, and to come out of that with a 2-page handout that we used at all our meetings with our stakeholder organizations and civic groups and staff. And also that formed the basis of the surveys that we put out in July and August. We had quite a remarkable uptake on the surveys and in July and August. And thank you very much to Heather and other members of your staff who made that possible to get, say, about a 25% return on a random sample, and then another almost 400 responses to the open online opportunity to respond to the same survey. Quite remarkable. All of that with the massive data now that you got over the weekend. I'm sure you lost sleep plowing through all the survey results and very summaries of the 20 some odd meetings that we held. And so that's where we are now. This workshop, as Murray said, now to try and digest a lot of that information and get us to a very preliminary, and important to say, I think preliminary, because we're going to be using the results of today's meeting, putting some of the pen to paper really for the first time on your behalf in emphasizing that we're doing this for the purpose of getting feedback from the public about some of your strategic directions and priorities, and even some of the potential solutions or initiatives. But nobody's committed to anything at this point, and just really for the point to say, we're narrowing this down, channeling to a point where we do get to a meaningful action plan. So yeah, we will be doing having another round, and we've assured people that we met with the first time that will be another round of consulting them, meet with some of the same groups. Some of the others that we weren't able to meet with the first time will have said, listen, when you're back again, can we meet with you then? And we've said, sure, we'll arrange that. Possibly some Zoom meetings with larger numbers and in-person meetings with some smaller numbers of people. All of that for the purpose of getting feedback on the sort of preliminary draft that comes out of today's meeting. And then all of that, second round of input, we will feed back to you. May not be quite as voluminous as what you got over the weekend, but there'll be lots of it, I'm sure. And at that point, then we start to funnel down to add dimensions like practicality, what conditions have to exist to make some things possible, what kind of timelines we'd be attaching to some of the initiatives, et cetera. And all of that now takes us into November. Next one, Mary, please. And where we would be getting back to you with the third workshop, where we start to match not only what council would like to do, but also what's likely to be feasible and in what period of time it's likely to be feasible. And what kind of measures we would apply to say this is working, it's not working, how will we know in 5 years' time whether it was a success? And then finally, we bring that down to a full draft of the strategic plan for you to look at, back to you again to revise some of that. And by the end of the year, we've said that we hope that we will have for you what you want to say, and present that to a council meeting before the end of the year. Murray, you're on mute, I think.
All right, now we're going to turn to perhaps matters of a little more interest, to try to distill what we heard through the surveys. We had terrific response both to the online and the analog survey, and very interesting engagement with the community groups. And we'll be able to respond to questions as we proceed. There is a lot of good news in Middlesex Centre. We found generally high levels of satisfaction with most infrastructure and programs and services. There were conversations about community services, parks and rec, fire services that we're going to touch on. Talked about rural roads, which is always a popular topic in an amalgamated community. There didn't seem to be undue resistance or pushback on the level of taxation. And we know that Middlesex Centre enjoys, relative to your sister municipalities across the county, a positive tax rate. We, as you would anticipate, and we're going to talk quite a bit about land use, we did take in input on the official plan. We're going to talk about that. It's a timely review. We found generally that there is a very strong set of community organizations with a very strong attachment to the agricultural heritage of the community. Sorry, excuse me. Just turn my phone off here. We have found in a fiscal sense that the municipality has proceeded with successfully with setting up reserve funds and reserves, and that there is an improving relationship in the development community. We're going to talk about that, and a very strong attachment to the urban settlement areas, the villages and the hamlets in the municipality of Middlesex Centre.
Okay, my piece then is to summarize, and I think both Maria and I hasten to add that we heard and we're very grateful for all the stakeholders that took the time to meet with us, and all the, what are we talking about now, over 500 people, I guess, who filled out the survey in one form or another. Gives us a lot of meat, and so this is really quite a high level summary that we've had to boil down to all of this. And I wanted to mention just before I do this, in the survey and to some extent in our meetings with our organizations, we heard a lot of very specific things. So needed for a street light at the corner of X and Y. And we haven't, you didn't get that over the weekend, but we have faithfully transcribed all of that and provided that to your staff. There was those very site-specific details. And so for the viewers of this meeting, I wanted to assure all of them too that we haven't lost all that information. We're grateful for the time that people took to give us that level of detail. But at this point, we're summarizing. We're a bit of a higher level. All right. So one of the most common things that the surveys yielded is a concern for safety. And in the one of the PowerPoints that you got over the weekend, we talked about that. What 3 words would you use to describe the Middlesex Centre that you would like to see in the future? And as I say, we had over 500 responses to that answer. And the most common word was safety. And that I found a little perplexing because, you know, I'm not aware of any, riots or mass murders in Middlesex Centre. And it became clear from other questions from the survey that was mostly about road use, pedestrian, traffic, bicycle type of safety. Perhaps on an equal scale, we heard about residential development. And I would say out of the residential, the questions, the write-ins on the surveys, a lot of that was we're becoming London. It's getting away from us. That kind of comment that was in the write-in. 3 sources really. I should step back a bit. Surveys. There was one, the random sample survey that was sent out to people that we didn't know they were going to get it, and nobody knew who they were. Every 7th entry on the residential assessment rule, and we got about a 25% response from that, which is pretty good. And that was added up to 158 responses out of the 648 invitations. There was the open online survey where anybody could fill it out, and Heather and the staff team did a wonderful job of promoting that through social media channels and LED signs and so on. And 395 people, which is a lot, logged on to that survey and took the opportunity to fill in the same questions as had been asked in the random sample questionnaire, as well as a few others. And not all of those 395 answered every question, of course, but many of them answered certainly some of the first questions. So also a powerful source of information. And in both of those surveys and in all the meetings we held, we had little orange sheets that we didn't let anybody away without filling in the question. If there was just one thing that Middlesex Centre could do right now to make Middlesex Center a better place? What would that one thing be? So, as I said, we had about 500 responses, which is, again, a pretty powerful indication, I think, to council and staff of what's top of mind. What comes to mind when you're given an open-ended opportunity to say, okay, what's most important? And again, the safety thing came a lot out of that. Residential development thing came, a good deal out of that. And you're hearing a bit of a mix of some of the quantitative questions as well as those qualitative or write-in answers. New business. We heard a lot in one form or another of new business. A lot of the write-ins said not looking for big box stores, but as Murray alluded to earlier, in some of the questions in the questionnaire got at this, a great deal of loyalty to villages, a great deal of appetite for revitalization of the villages. And so mostly this was in the context of new business. We heard everything from industry to home business, farm gate business, and so on in the write-ins. Again, in the write-ins, the issue of broadband, not to anyone's surprise, was very prominent. We heard in some of the questions that were asked about protecting agricultural land, reinforcing the agricultural economy, about celebrating the agricultural heritage, a landslide victory, if I can put it that way, for in terms of the responses to those kinds of questions. And perhaps most interesting to me, at least, was that the congruence between the random sample and 158 responses to those, and the 395 responses to the open online. Anybody who wanted to answer could go online and answer. Really not a lot of substantial difference between the kinds of answers you got. The online group skewed perhaps a little bit more urban than the 158 random sample respondents, but really a lot of similarity in their answers. And this was an area that won both the adherence to the villages as well as to the celebration of agricultural heritage were common to both survey responses. Next one, right, please. As I mentioned, the loyalty to the villages came out both in the write-in responses to the just one thing question, as well as the questions that we asked specifically about village, the importance of villages to the respondents. And generally speaking, that sense of small town feel came with words that were used in the write-in just one thing responses time after time. Community spirit, and a lot of the specifics about the Ilderton core and specifics about Kamoka. Kamoka, of course, with Glendon Road being an issue, was sort of mixed up with the question of traffic safety, but also that sort of desire for a core and a sense of belonging to a village entity. You saw the PowerPoint that over the weekend, which was tried to analyze the responses to the questions about infrastructure and services. And we're able, if you like, I think it's quite valuable. I've done this several times before in other places, an opportunity to compare. We asked about how important is this infrastructure or this service to you? How satisfied are you with what you're receiving, or the condition of the infrastructure, or the quality of the service that you're receiving now? And then what would be your advice to council about future spending on that infrastructure or those services? And then in one of the PowerPoints you got, we sort of lined those up and said, okay, now if we talk about sort of road infrastructure, we talk about community centers, we talk about fire services, and so on. And if you'll harken back to those, Murray made the point at the beginning, as I say, we've done this elsewhere, quite a substantial amount of satisfaction with most of what you're doing. And I think it bears sort of congratulations and certainly note in passing that roads being a good example. I mean, this is not something where people generally indicate a lot of satisfaction. Your respondents indicated higher level of satisfaction than I'm used to seeing, I'll put it that way. And so I think that says a tale. But by the same token, there was one where people said, very important, the road conditions, infrastructure, very important to people. Satisfaction, significantly high, but not nearly as high as the importance. And so the advice to council about spending on that one, let's take this example to start with, is, if you need to spend more above the level of inflation to improve the condition of the roads, then you've got a mandate, according to those respondents, to do that. Similarly with plowing, with the service of snow plowing, people, are surprisingly satisfied, I would say, on balance, but it's critically important to people. And so again, the response about your advice to council on future spending is, if you need to spend more to improve that service, then there's an appetite to do that. Similar, and perhaps the only other one which was similar, was trails. There's, and Murray and I were speculating that this, to some extent, might be a bit of a legacy of our COVID spring and COVID summer, but very important to people, and people fairly satisfied with what they're getting, but there's quite a gap between how important things are and how satisfied people are. And a mandate, advice to council to say, if you need to spend some more to improve, expand the trails, do that. As is common in sort of rural and small town municipalities, the fire service critically important to people, fire stations critically important to people, high levels of satisfaction, at least as people indicating at least as much satisfaction as importance, but because of the nature of the service, obviously, again, the advice to council was, if you need to spend more to improve, pardon me, or maintain that level of satisfaction, then a mandate to do so. Most of the other services and types of infrastructure that were asked about, when we compared those, the importance and the level of satisfaction and the advice to council about future spending, was all pretty much, sure, we're fine, moderately important, moderately satisfied, rate of inflation kind of future spending advice, and that's probably to be expected. The write-in comments, this is perhaps in retrospect, we were wondering whether or not we should have had one of the questions about this. A lot of comment about water rates. This won't come as any surprise to you as members of council, obviously. And we understand, Marie and I both have municipal backgrounds. We understand how these things happen. And in fact, we learned from staff that a lot of this is about the reserves that you're required to have. Nonetheless, it's an issue out there. We heard in person, we can talk about this, but certainly the write-in responses in the questionnaire is a lot about water rates. We heard in various ways about, I'll call it customer service, or the relationship between the public and municipality. Again, I've heard a lot more contentious, relationships in other municipalities that I've worked in, but certainly a desire for, and some of the questions that were added questions for the open online survey indicated that an appetite for electronic services, a broader range of electronic services. A lot of the write-in comments were about, we like this, asking us our opinion and listening to us kind of thing. And then we had write-in comments about things like, being able to reach a person on the phone when you call in and things like that. So a package of, I'll call it customer service or citizen engagement concerns. Okay, with all of that, I'll stop there. Marie is going to carry on with the sort of high-level summary of the actual meetings that we held with organizations. But before he does that, is there any questions or comments or follow-ups that any members of council would like to make?
Questions? I don't see any. I've got a couple.
Okay.
I'm wondering, did you segment the data by quote urban and quote rural residents? Was that something you did? I'm looking at some of these comments and I'm wondering where they came from geographically in the municipality.
In the case of the random sample survey, we intentionally didn't do that, and because it's the point of it is it could be anywhere, anybody, anywhere. With the open online survey, we did ask that question about, would you say you live in a more rural or more urban environment? And in that case, we got, it was sort of roughly 60% of people who identified themselves as living in a more urban environment and about 40% in a more rural environment. But we didn't do the mathematical calculation of what kind of answers people gave, if they said one or the other of those on that question.
Oh, okay, thank you.
As I was mentioning earlier, in general terms, we could tell from the kinds of answers we were getting and the kind of write-ins that we had, the open online survey perhaps attracted a somewhat more urban gang than the random sample respondents. But as you can see in some of the column charts that I sent you, remarkable the levels of correspondence between the two groups of respondents.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because I have selective perception. Who talk to me about trails tend to live in one area. The people who talk to me about roads these days are in another area. And I don't hear about roads, for example, in urban areas, the quality of roads and so forth, plowing or the conditions of roads, whereas I would hear more from agricultural users about the size of the road and the proportion of new residents who are moving into rural areas who want roads paved. And that was the reason I'm wondering, it's pretty specific what I'm hearing, and I just wanted to get clarification if it's me and selective perception and the people I'm talking to, or if that's a mood across the municipality. So, okay, thanks for that answer. I have a question from Councillor Arts.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is a question or excuse me, an observation, but if you do define rural and urban, there's two rural people out there anymore. There's rural residential and rural agriculture, and I imagine, I'm not sure if those views would be similar or not. Thank you.
In the question that was asked on the open online survey, we let people define for themselves. Do you feel you're more rural or more urban environment? But I would say that even on the snow plowing question, by and large, we were hearing reasonable levels of satisfaction and obviously high levels of importance to people about that. And I think the mayor is correct. If insofar as the open online survey group were a little more urban, just judging by all the, wrapping up all the answers that they looked at, they tend to be a little more satisfied in the urban area than a little more satisfied in the open online survey with the quality of snow plowing than they were in the random sample respondents, which, as I said, were a little more rural in their, I'm guessing a little more rural in the background.
I think you're probably right. I mean, the random sample survey numbers across the whole municipality, 7th roll numbers. So obviously, and when you look at the social media comments online during the survey, those were primarily driven through Comoquid neighborhood, the neighbor and Ilderton neighbors. There were some comments in Delaware, but I think that activity was called self-generated, if you will. So I think you're right on that perception. That's why I wondered, because of the random survey is the one that I was kind of focusing in on, because everyone has an equal opportunity to be selected and respond.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll let you continue on with your presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things I'd like to offer at this interval. we're going to move on to review the distilled intake that we or the takeaways that we took away from the direct engagement with the stakeholder groups. You're going to see a degree of redundancy or duplication on issues, opportunities, general themes, and of course that's to be expected, and reinforces some of the much of the input that we have analyzed from both the online and the random analog survey. And the other thing I would offer is that if there are any questions as we go or any comments, we'd certainly like to hear those. I'm going to move on then to the next slide, which is a summary of the input that we received from the sessions. We spent quite a number of full days in the community back in August, and in September we've also had a number of online meetings, Zoom meetings, telephone engagements. And as Bill mentioned earlier, we're still batting cleanup on a few of those. For example, I have a telephone call this Friday with Philip from the Sept group, who seems to be quite keen to connect on the telephone. And so there's some of that cleanup that we're doing now. This is just noting where we physically met with individuals and groups. We did observe distancing protocols, and thank you to Scott and Heather for logistics in that regard and setting up the facilities. We met with over 25 stakeholder groups and individuals. Generally speaking, I think the engagement sessions were quite popular with the groups, very well received and productive. No one beat us up too badly. And in general, we were very well received, and people in the groups very much appreciated the opportunity to share their views. It was a fairly basic engagement session. We did very short, we used this short slide deck, Municipal Strategic Planning 101, if you will, introduced ourselves, of course, and described the purpose of this initiative. We reviewed what strategic planning is and what it isn't. I touched on that earlier during this meeting. And we used as the platform, as we discussed on June 24th, we used that set of issues and opportunities that came from our first workshop as really the platform to launch our engagement and to stimulate discussion and conversations. I'll move on. Key takeaways from the direct engagement then, again, degree of reinforcement, if you will. The broadband availability, high-speed internet across the rural areas was a top consideration. We heard from, generally speaking, sort of a universal comment there. I would note that the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, the SWIFT group, currently have requests for proposals out from within the telecommunications industry to roll out or expand broadband within Middlesex County, including Middlesex Centre. That RFP closes on November the 6th. Remains to be seen just what the outcome of that will be. But I think there's no reason not to be somewhat, to be feeling somewhat positive on that point. I'll move on. Again, reinforcing very strong sentiments within groups, predictably a very strong attachment to the agricultural heritage of the area, of the municipality, and strong attachment to the urban settlement areas, as I mentioned earlier. Very important, the look and feel of, generally speaking, the rural vernacular, if I could use that term, and the small village vernacular, very important themes in our engagement. And that actually applies, I would offer, to both long-term residents and newcomers, embracing that sense of community and the small town feel. There is a sense that development is progressing apace, perhaps too much, too fast, and we can talk about that. There is also an important conversation around attainable housing and affordable housing. And just to reinforce, you'll recall that when Bill and I were first engaged, we did undertake to receive input on the official plan, because you'll recall at that point the municipality hadn't proceeded with the official plan review. There was an interruption, a delay, and quite a bit of the input that we've been receiving and analyzing relates to the official plan review, which is, as you know, which is progressing in parallel with this process. And we have communicated closely with the WSP consulting team. We have shared our data with them, and much of the input that we've received will be of significant value to that process. Strong feeling that productive agricultural land should be preserved, reinforce that the productive farmland in Middlesex County is among the best of the Class 1 farmland across the province. Again, a note on attainable, affordable housing, that the law of supply, demand, and price is prevailing, and even newer styles of higher density housing, for example, townhomes and linked homes, because of the law of supply and demand, are driving those prices out of reach in terms of attainability. There were sentiments that development should be restricted to existing settlement areas where full services are available. Are there any comments or discussion on any of these pieces before we move on?
Hugh?
Yeah, through your mayor, this is gonna sound cynical, but I'm gonna say it anyways. How much of the attachment to agriculture is just a urban way of stopping development? They seem to get used when they don't want anything built. All of a sudden, agriculture, they have to preserve all the farmland. I'm just putting that one out there.
I didn't quite catch that there was some transmission problem at the end of your comment. No, I think it's probably fair to offer the observation that, you know, a significant sort of reflection of the strong attachment to the agricultural heritage came from groups that are associated with agriculture. The Fair Board, the Federation of Agriculture, and those groups were reflecting their mandate and the values that they bring from their organizations. I would also offer, having had, personally quite a bit of experience in amalgamated municipalities where there is the challenge of sort of the new urban and the traditional rural agricultural interface, that much of the attraction for urban folks moving in the community is that flavor, is that agricultural flavor. There may be something sort of remotely sentimental about it, but there is, I think, an appeal that harkens back to an earlier time, and those are some of the observations I would offer.
I just chip in on that question. Harkening back to the surveys, one of the survey questions was specifically about importance or not of preserving agricultural land. And the response to that was almost universally either very important or important, across the board. So as we talked a little bit earlier, certainly there were some urban people responding, but also a lot of people who identify themselves as rural responding to both those surveys, both the random sample and the optional. And but that agricultural land thing seemed to be a universal comment.
And I think,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry,
Your Worship,
go ahead.
I was just going to reinforce that to harken back to the June 24th meeting, the workshop with council, and the list of challenges and opportunities that emerged from that session. A great deal of the input that we received and that we're describing here reinforces those notions that you brought to the table back in June. So it's really an important exercise of reinforcing, the intuition that you already had, your understanding of the community, the forces that are at work within the community, and really that adds validity to the political role, the political dimension of this process.
Okay, thanks. Now, I also had just a comment, I guess, or question too, about restricting development to existing settlement areas. And so this is what I'm hearing is it's just a reinforcement of the existing policy at this point, that's the thing to do, is make sure that, the only housing that we're trying to sort of is preserve through consents is surplus farm residences. We're not really building anything new. Well, people are tearing down old farmhouses and building new homes. That's one thing, but development is now pushed to existing settlement areas. So I think what I'm hearing is that those themes are being reinforced now in a continuing way, and that it isn't a criticism of current policy. Is that right?
Oh, I think very much the case. Yeah, very much the case, Your Worship. I think that's spot on. That much of the messaging there is stay the course. Hold the line to the course that you set.
Okay, and I'm also interested in your insight on affordable, attainable housing is needed. Seems every time we've had a proposal that suggests some kind of different density or different population, even when it's a senior population as opposed to, we'll call it affordable, and then we get questions about is this subsidized housing. Could you just clarify, is this employer groups or employee who are looking for employees? Where is this theme of affordable, attainable housing coming from? I know it's something that we as a council have been looking at as important to diversifying the kind of housing stock we have in the community, but I'm just wondering where it's coming from in the community.
Maybe I just one of the reflections, Your Worship, that struck me was that we heard this, I think, Murray, most strenuously from our meetings with the firefighters in the fire halls. I think where it came up certainly as strongly as any place, and that was from the point of view of people's children and so on, perhaps in some cases people's employees, and just the recognition that it was, we heard. But I think in that case, I remember several people saying that they had children who weren't going to be able to live in Middlesex Centre because of the way prices were going. And I'm also thinking that, and this showed up in some of the survey responses as well, that a willingness to consider, not universal, don't get me wrong, but a willingness to consider higher levels of density, so row houses kind of thing, in order to achieve some of this, than perhaps more of a willingness than we might have expected.
Okay. So the people that were attending at fire halls were residents. This was a residence session that was held there physically, or is this our employees, the firefighters who were responding.
The firefighters.
Interesting. Okay.
Just a couple of observations, Your Worship, if I could, on the notion of attainable or affordable housing. I think at a very high level general sense, I think some of the reaction from the groups or some of that sentiment was just a reflection of holy smoke, look what's happening to the values in our community. By golly, you know, I remember when I bought my first house for, you know, $20,000 and half an acre of land. I think there's just a sense of how rapidly values are escalating. There were also comments, as Bill mentioned, from specific individuals, also employees of the municipality in public works looking to build or purchase a property, maybe with a little piece of land, feeling somewhat discouraged that it's really out of sight. And then the third input was from the employment sector, from the business community, that in order to attract and retain employees, they were hoping, perhaps against hope, that higher density housing, rental accommodation, multiple residential uses could be developed. And you know, I say hope against hope because these are natural market forces, the laws of supply and demand, and you'll have you know, opportunity to look at mixing land uses and different forms and types of housing and different densities as you progress through the official plan. But there's only so much that you can do in that regard in terms of manipulating the market. So, you know, some of that sentiment, I think, is just that. It's just sentiment, and by golly, look what's happening to values in the community.
Back into the survey response, we asked that question in the survey about how important is attainable, affordable housing, rental housing to you. And then we asked the question about, you know, would you see spending any money on it? And so the responses about importance were kind of a mixed bag. And that was true. Perhaps in the open online survey, there was a little bit more importance attached to it. The random sample survey, a little bit less. But generally speaking, kind of a mixed bag. But the question about would you spend want council to spend any money on it was very clear, no. It's a policy issue.
Okay. Does anyone have any further comment, question on that? Councillor Scott, then Councillor Silva. Oh, no, sorry, just Councillor Scott.
Yes, through the mayor, this is kind of an observation. So the polls say that they want to kind of protect farmland. And then we're in a position also to provide, you know, enough residential places for the next 25 years. So that kind of clashes there. And I'm going, how do we do both? If we're told to do that, and now and protecting farmland's important to everybody here, which I think that's probably everybody's thoughts too, but how do you accomplish both?
And then just add over the fact that you need to keep the agricultural and small town look and feel to that high density building. Councillor Silva.
Now I'll chime in. Yeah, and you know, for better or worse, I hear this a lot. You know, given the amount of building happening in my neighborhood, literally down the street from me. You know, we can't all have 60 to 75 foot lots. We don't all want or can afford 60 to 75 foot lots. And, you know, so a lot of the newer houses are smaller lots, fairly large houses actually regardless, which tends to make people feel like we're turning into London, quote unquote. But ultimately, you know, like we're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place here, where people want the exact opposites of each other. You know, they want lower water rates, but the same size houses and lots, but you know, more affordable housing, et cetera, and so on. So we do the best we can, I think, and we consult a lot. And you know, at the end of the day, hopefully we've made a good decision, and most people are happy or at least satisfied with it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of striking that balance, at least on my time on council. So yeah, we just got to keep doing what we're doing, I think, for the most part, and just keep that in mind when inevitably other applications come forward, because I know there are more in the pipeline now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll just comment too that I think we've even been open to proposals of new urbanism, which would increase density, but give it a look. I mean, we did the tour, and yeah, so we're open to all of that kind of thing. So that'll be a good discussion to have as a strategic plan going forward. And I guess there's nothing, we're just like BC, where kids can't afford to live in the house their parents did, or Montreal or Toronto, or a lot of other places now in Haliburton, Muskoka that are going off the charts because people don't want to necessarily be in the city anymore. So that is a problem, I think, for the generation that's going to be looking for homes. I'll let you move along. Oh, sorry, one more question? Oh, comment. Oh, I thought you were pointing to a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I echo the comments from members of council, and I hope that with WSP helping us with the official plan review, it'll help us strike that balance. It's not going to be perfect, but undertaking the review to help us forecast over the next, immediate and long-term growth will help council with its decision-making process and continue to get the applications. Councillor Sullivan said it, there's a lot in the queue, so planning that out, doing it methodically, pragmatically, will help us achieve that balanced growth.
If I may, just one other thing. A lot of people are seeing a lot of development right now. That is a consequence of OPA 28, which started in late 2008-9 and was wrapping up in 2010 when the election came out. Those houses are finally being built in, on the south side of Glendon Drive. It looks like something happened overnight, but that's a decade or more in the making. And the same is true for Ilderton. It's taken quite a while to get. So, and I know we're required under the Planning Act to have, as Councillor Scott pointed out, that inventory of land in the hopper. Yeah, but we need to make sure we put it in the right place. And I think the timing is with the official plan amendment review it's converging to a place where we'll get that figured out and do it right. If there's nothing else, then we can, I guess, move on to the next slide. If you'd like to take.
Thank you, Worship. Just a final comment there. As was noted, the course that you're on now, perhaps with the official plan, which focuses development in the settlement areas, is a course that you want to hold. And I think it's important, sort of in the political dimension, to note that these are sentiments that we're hearing. There's nothing new here to you. That perhaps the takeaway from this conversation is managing change, and as your CAO has noted, there'll be plenty of opportunity to inform and engage the community, and hopefully raise awareness and understanding of the challenges that you're facing in terms of having to meet those and respond to those legitimate demands for growth and provide for growth, and yet walk that tightrope in addressing the values that are held to be important. I'll move on. Some more takeaways, and I think we've addressed this reasonably well, that the rural-urban schism requires some education and engagement. This was a common theme across virtually all of the groups, that they would welcome greater engagement with the municipality, closer communication. Certain of the groups felt that their role may not be fully appreciated. And when I talk about groups, the scope ranges from service clubs to minor sporting groups to the clergy to business associations, the development sector. A real sort of sincere desire to develop a closer relationship with the municipality, and expressed in a positive sense. We heard a lot about school planning and I guess if we could call it the Oxbow incident, in terms of school deployment, school planning, and student deployment. Although it's not reflected in the material, I did connect with the chair of the Thames Valley School Board the other day, and her comments were helpful to me, and I'll be providing some supplementary notes in that regard. And so it has been suggested that council take a more assertive and an advocacy role in terms of school planning and deployment. And I know how challenging that is. I understand, I think we all understand the relatively limited role of the trustee since the reform a couple of decades ago. But that was a comment that we heard largely in the context of busing and the challenge of distributing students across the school network. Here's a specific observation that there is a gap in Middlesex Centre. Suggested that a food bank is desirable, and a desire for to engage the municipality to look at a possible role, a supportive role in that regard. Similarly, the archives group felt that there may be mutual benefit in forging a relationship, both in terms of records management, record storage, and retrieval, and overall records handling. Looking to have a conversation there. Again, very positive. And then this was a comment from your senior management team that the climate change filter or lens should be applied across all programming and services. And there I would offer that you know, you've clearly you're walking the walk and talking the talk there in many of your programs. The Coldstream Fire Hall is a shining example of sustainability, and I think that was just intended to reinforce not to lose sight on the critical importance of greenhouse gas reduction and reducing the carbon footprint. It was suggested that further investigation into economic development planning, business attraction, developing employment lands. There was a specific suggestion to attempt to attract a branded hotel in order to support community activities and special events. Some conversation around the COVID, I suppose, opportunity to promote Middlesex Centre for home-based and small-scale tech, and a specific comment from the medical community that consideration should possibly be given to rolling in a physician recruitment program into economic development strategic planning. This next point really reinforces, I think, the culture that Middlesex Centre is building in terms of inclusivity, diversity, community engagement, transparency, and innovation. Recognizing, and this is sort of on the HR side, recognizing emerging lifestyle trends, the importance of professional development and training. We've already talked about customer service and broadening the scope of online applications. This is a fairly important point that will require, I think, consideration by council, and that is associated with the fire rescue service and the distribution of your stations, the 5 stations across the municipality. we've heard different views on what's perceived in some sectors as a gap in your highest population concentration of Kamoka-Kilworth, that there is a gap there with the service coming from Delaware. There are different views on that notion associated with volunteer attraction and retention. But it was an important point. We heard from different quarters in that regard. The views are not entirely consistent, and we would offer that this is an area that does require some attention and consideration by council. We also heard from the development community. You will have seen this from the notes that we provided with you over the weekend, provided to you, that there were concerns, and I'm using the past tense there, with regard to inconsistent management of planning and development applications, building applications, file management, uncertainty with process, introducing matters partway through the process that perhaps weren't addressed at the outset. But overall, the sentiment there is that improvements on an upward curve, and I think credit goes to your team for addressing those concerns and moving forward with improvement. There was a notion that Kamoka-Kilworth lacks identity as a community, and Bill sort of referenced that earlier, the challenge of dealing with really, I guess, the absence of a downtown Main Street, with Glendon being an arterial county road, and how to address that. Again, official plan considerations in that regard.
Murray,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Brennan has a question. I was having I don't know quite how to interrupt you. Sorry about that.
Just go ahead.
Thank you. If you back up a couple of slides back to the planning and the firefighting, I've got a couple of, when we get these comments from the public, I'm not sure they totally understand what the procedures and what's going on. If you look at the planning and building applications, we've just moved to online applications being done in that. So I think some people may not realize the efficiencies that in the building and planning department have done with online building permits and that sort of thing. I think our timelines are probably pretty decent. And so I caution the total effect of what people are saying, because they may not totally understand what our procedures are. As far as we go back to fire services, the distribution of those stations were already in place when the amalgamations took place a number of years ago, when the three municipalities amalgamated. And the timelines in which responses are made are quite adequate for all across the municipality. So people may think that they need something when in fact the timelines that are there are probably as good, if not better, than across the county. And as far as attraction and retention, our fire chief has implemented quite a sophisticated attraction and training session for firefighters that a lot of others, including the City of London, have sent people out for them to get trained so they could start. So I just question on a couple of these things that people are making comments and they're not fully aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, without doubt, and those are important comments. And I just want to reinforce with respect to development and the permit and file management and applications. You just want to reinforce that often these engagement sessions provide an opportunity for old grievances and issues to be aired. But the overall message there was that that in terms of Planning Act and building permit applications, the general message was that was then, and this is now. And there was a sense that the team is really making terrific strides in addressing those concerns. You have to consider that we're a conduit here. We're bringing comments to you that we've heard. We haven't interpreted them. We're bringing them to you as they were expressed to us. And so, with regard to the fire rescue service, I was a volunteer firefighter for 10 years. I have a soft spot for fire rescue service. I understand fire rescue service. And your point's very well taken. You inherited the distribution of the stations. Your response times are well within provincial standards, mandated standards. And so maybe there, it's a matter of perception, and that goes to communication, and we'll be able to provide you details on who's saying these things. So there may be real value in direct engagement and correcting some of those perceptions. But this is what we heard, and it wasn't entirely consistent. We heard, and the survey results, I think, reveal that very high degree of satisfaction with the fire rescue service. But there are other views. They were brought to the table, and we're presenting them to you. And so it may just suggest there's some messaging that perhaps the municipality should consider in its communications planning.
I just reinforced Murray's comment too, that, I think the deputy mayor's comment is a good one across the board for all the reporting that we've done. The one about water rates is one which comes back to me. And for example, and we talked a little bit about some of the planning issues. And there are some cases where, when you get maybe to the next stage of today, let alone the final strategic plan, the response may not be, let's change something response. It may be, we need to communicate response. And so there's a lot of the building understanding, which may be the appropriate next step, rather than saying, okay, we have to do something differently in terms of expenditure or policy or what have you.
Very much so. Okay. Let's pick up where we were. Kamoka-Kilworth, challenging considerations there in terms of identity, and Glendon Road as an arterial road, and the limitations there. A lot of conversation around Ilderton. As you may know, Bill and I were engaged to review the current Ilderton Community Improvement Plan, a plan established by bylaw under the Planning Act and pursuant to your current official plan. And these are comments not stemming from our review. These are comments from the community and the stakeholders that the Dr. Avi Friedman plan, as beautiful and elegant as it is overly ambitious for the community and presents an unrealistic, unattainable vision. We heard very loud and clearly that the small node of development at the corner with Tim Hortons and the small commercial plaza is in conflict with the vision presented in the Friedman plan, and tends to fragment the downtown core business community, business center. Also heard quite a bit about the, if I could call them, the silo lands as a missing piece, and as a challenge, but also a real opportunity to create something very special for Ilderton's central core. The community improvement plan, which is in effect now, in addition to all of the other programming in the plan, does set out a very specific commitment of council to invest in the public realm in terms of streetscape improvements, public property improvements. And it was felt that the council's commitment to that perhaps hasn't been as solid and is somewhat uncertain. And we also heard quite a bit about the ice pad, and I share your regret that your request for funding wasn't successful. I think again there, as we've just talked about with fire service and development review, that maybe there's a communication gap because the business case for the new ice pad development at Ilderton is not fully understood, and again just suggests perhaps some heightened communication planning.
We have some questions on this page.
Right.
Councilor Silva.
Thank you. It's too bad Councilor Hefferman's not here, but I think it's interesting that the Avi Friedman plan for Kamoka, I guess we're not getting comments about that being overly ambitious, but we are for Ilderton. But I'm not the councillor for Ilderton, so I'll speak to Kamoka and Kilworth. So we do have, our own plan from Dr. Avi Friedman around the wellness center and the commercial plaza that's already there now with the food land and Kamoka Mortgage Center and all that, and the surrounding lands, I'll call it. Did anybody identify that as a good spot in their mind for what that core is, or did they have any comments on where it could be instead? I mean, design considerations for development. Yeah, sure. No, I think we're all cognizant of, stuff facing Glendon Drive should look nice. That's fine. But yeah, were there any specifics around where that core could or should be?
A couple of considerations there. Good observation. Quite a number of positive comments with respect to the food land and the commercial retail opportunities that have been developed in Kamoka Kilworth. I think overall there is a sense, I won't say futility, but the real challenge in creating a sense of a main street and a feeling of a downtown village core, such as you see in Ilderton or even Delaware, for example, and the challenge that Glendon presents in that regard. And a specific concern in that regard was pedestrian movement across Glendon, that it's not, it doesn't facilitate pedestrian access. It doesn't feel like a downtown main street in a village. And challenging, obviously, to respond to that when you're looking at an arterial road. In a typical downtown, in a village, you'd look at, build out nodes, streetscape improvements, narrowing the road, on-street parking, all those sorts of urban design considerations that likely aren't even possible on Glendon Road.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I've lived in the area for about 11 years now. It's certainly a struggle to find a place that can feel like, I'll say, Front Street or Frank Street in Strathroy, which historically have been, main streets and work really well still in that regard. But, I think we had no other choice but to just start over somewhere new, and that's kind of what we're doing. So that's fine. And, for anybody watching, yes, the fact that you can't get between the two communities, the two villages easily without a vehicle or walking or cycling down a gravel shoulder, we're well aware, and it's certainly something I would like to see resolved. But as maybe a lot of people don't know, Glendon Drive is a county road. We don't control it, so we have to work with the county on that, and hopefully, budget pending, some of that work will start next year.
Good information to share. And over to Bill.
All right. We are on the cusp of keeping quiet and turning some of the discussion over to members of council. Just a little bit of a, as I say, what would life be without a graphic? This is a bit of a one-page summary of the whole process here. And we, as Murray said earlier, we, in our request for input today, we just provided 4 themes. We can come back to those at a later stage of the process. I think it's easy enough to talk about things, good government and, prosperous economy and so on. We just didn't want to take time today to deal with that. But it's the next stage now where we're talking about, and you helped us with our last session in June. What are some of the opportunities, some of the obstacles, some of the challenges that Middlesex Centre faces on a variety of fronts? Now we're at the stage of saying, okay, so of all those things, and we hope we faithfully reported, and as Murray said, your intuition was way ahead of us. What are some of the things where we start to narrow down to ultimately a strategic plan where we say, here are some of the directions, the issues and opportunities that we're going to do something about. We're not yet looking at the stage of saying, okay, what are we going to do about them? But we're saying these are the things we're going to do something about. So in 5 years' time, people will have noticed a difference about some of these opportunities and obstacles that challenges, issues that are going to be confronted. And ultimately, this boils down, and as I said, we're probably talking November to the point where we have a municipal action plan that addresses those issues. So the next one, right? What we've asked for is under these 4 placeholder, I'll call them placeholder themes, what would be a couple? And I think probably the simplest thing is if we just went around the table in a minute or two here for a couple of the directions, priorities, the priority challenges or the priority opportunities, things you want to make sure you do something about over the next 5 years, right?
So if we have 15 minutes to each topic, then we'll get through the agenda, or we have to, I guess, draw a line in the sand today.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. That'd be good. And so this, as I say, I'm not looking for solutions yet, but it's just what are the somewhat broad, an example. If under community life and land use, you were to say something about celebrating the agricultural heritage, that's not specific in terms of what exactly you're going to do about that, but it does at least say, okay, there's something that you see an opportunity that needs to be addressed over the next 5 years. So that's just an example. I'm not preaching that, but it's that level of detail. And yet to come at a later stage will be, okay, what exactly is the action, a series of actions that you're going to take. So with that, this is Murray's and my opportunity to sort of to listen a little bit, and we'll be taking some notes. I think with Heather's technical prowess, we'll be able to take some notes as we go along. If one member of council says something that somebody else agrees with, don't hesitate. You don't have to make up something new. In fact, if anything, it'll tell us that if there's a groundswell of agreement in some of these areas, and that's useful to us for sure. Your Worship, would you like to start?
Okay, so under community life and land use. So I want to reiterate then our commitment to effective use of land insofar as preserving agricultural, but for me that gets all wound up in, for example, I go back to my new urbanism. To the extent that we have homes that are built in that way, we have livable, walkable, friendly communities, but also ones that take up less space, therefore meeting our goal of preserving farmland, but providing various types of homes. So the example that we looked at had fourplexes, single family homes, and like all in a higher density area. So, but I guess we can be committed to that. But the problem is when a developer has a piece of land and comes to us with a site plan agreement, we can only do modifications. So I mean, I can talk about new urbanism till I'm blue in the face. If you go, yeah, okay, you're smoking cheap drugs. That's what it boils down to.
Well, you will have an opportunity to deal with this in quite some specifics with the official plan review and as you say, with individual applications. But I think that's perfect. So I mean, in there, there's that theme of preserving agricultural land, but also the theme of livable and that small town feel thing, which would be higher density possibly, but livable and walkable, good to live in. I got it.
And safety is part of that kind of design as well. Curvy streets where people can walk tend to slow cars down instead of having the boring grid things that we see in pardon me, Kilworth and developments that we've seen. Those square boxes on the map turn into speed alleys. And then people are saying we have kids playing on the street and nobody wants to walk their dog because they're afraid that someone's going to run into them.
Good, thank you. I can't see who's on your right, but who's ever on your right, would you like to give us one?
Want to jump in?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think my biggest thing right now is low cost housing. I think we kind of overshot this whole thing or overlooked it. And there was a high second in your survey there, and people can't afford to live in Middlesex Center. Another concern I have, and John, jumping on this one, is the one land issue there in Arva. People taking the trip down to, I believe, St. Catharines, look at some of the houses down there at one point, and now that's been sold to a big developer. So where are we going to go with that now? Like, that's a concern I have. Like, I kind of like the concept of what they were presenting at the time. Now developers taking it over, so now what happens at this point? I guess that's kind of what I'm looking at.
That's my problem with all of it too. We don't really control it. We can influence and we can suggest and we can have discussions and try to influence, but ultimately it's not our land. And I mean, unless we have a project of our own where we say build form this and build form that, and this is what it is, that's a whole nother ball of wax though.
Just for my information, was that your second comment from a member of council about this issue of the Kamoka core? I wasn't quite clear. We visited the Niagara on the Lake development, which is representative of others around North America. But I mean, the ideas that are implemented in the development of that kind are the ones that would put checks and boxes for us on the sustainability side, on the walkability and trails side, on the higher density side, Right.
Attracting various price points, because there are smaller homes for retirees, but there are bigger homes for families, and they're interspersed with fourplexes where maybe a single person would have part of it. So it's a community, and then there's community life there too, because it's not empty all winter because the snowbirds left, and it's not all only just families and then all of a sudden being empty. There's just a variety of people and different homes and different, it's all inclusive. It's kind of a long discussion. I think I'm taking up more than 10 minutes here.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, the other thing we didn't mention in that whole conversation just now was the idea of the pace and rate at which things happen, the tempo, the speed of development.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that we can control either, but that was an issue for residents as well.
Certainly an issue we heard about, the pace issue. Yeah. Okay. Right. Other aspects of community life and land use that represent challenges that need to be addressed?
Councillor Arts has comment.
I just figured okay, through your mayor, on land use, I think Gillerton should have infill before it goes out. I think we need to review our farm surplus house severances. I agree on affordable housing, but then it comes to what's your definition of affordable housing? On Kamoka on Glendon Drive, to make Kilworth and Kamoka accessible to one another, you need a pedestrian walk that either goes over Glendon or under Glendon, because there's just way too much traffic and it's not safe enough for people to cross that. And with the COVID-19 stuff and people starting to cocoon a bit, the issue is starting to come up again about granny flats, and I don't think we have any. And that is something we have to address.
And that might be something that gets folded under the housing options as one of a package of potential solutions. Good point.
Yeah, we've got two actually. They've both gone through. I'll just keep going around the horseshoe. Councillor
Yep.
Brett and Silva.
Please.
Okay, I just want to first community life. You know, are we, in my perspective, I think we're starting to lose that small town feeling in the areas where we're allowing development. We've got a lot of people moving to these areas, and I'll use Meadow Creek and Illerton for an example. They leave Meadow Creek, they turn left to London. When they come home, they turn right back into the subdivision. And I think we have to somehow get the people, if we want community life, we've got to get more people involved in the community. There's too many people living in these communities that don't get involved. As far as land use goes, maybe to, you know, the density, maybe, and we've had some proposals come to us that are maybe coming to us, apartment buildings, maybe 5-story apartment buildings, 6-story apartment buildings, to bring more residents to the community to support businesses. The problem with that is then we have to have some sort of public transit for these people to get to work and get back home again, because a lot of people that rent apartments don't have vehicles. But that some of that is in the works now. But we have a fund where we're attempting to buy some land to bring commercial development to support the tax base. So it's difficult for the municipality to find some land that we can afford to purchase and service and get ready to bring someone in for that. So I think those are things we're working on. I don't know how we get the people that live in these communities to participate in the communities rather than just live there. Thank you.
Could I just mention that's I'm glad you brought that up, because certainly in our discussions with the civic organizations, Optimists and Lions and so on, we heard consistently about that issue of participation and recruitment, and perhaps a number of the Agricultural Society being one that comes to mind, making sure that people who arrived in Middlesex Centre understood Middlesex Centre and the need for outreach. Good point.
Councillor Silva.
Thank you. I'll echo a lot of the comments made already. I'm not going to belabor those. I think actually a lot of this comes down to street design is a big part of it. You know, width, traffic calming measures, and that sort of thing to remind people, you know, the fact that they're in a residential area. And to build on what Deputy Mayor Brennan just said, in helping community groups promote their initiatives. I don't know how much cross-posting has done. Maybe Heather can give you a little signal there, considering she's in the room. But the Kamoka Community Market has had a banner year. Last year was not good, and I don't know why. But you know, this is their third year, and it's easily their best year yet. I see lots of new faces. I see lots of familiar faces. So, you know, to the extent that we can help those groups promote what they're doing, especially when it benefits the community as a whole. We're using wellness center parking lot space and all that. And I think they pay rent. So pay for the privilege to do that. You know, it gets people out, it gets people meeting each other, and it starts to rebuild that small town feel, because you start to see familiar faces, even if you don't know their names necessarily. And hopefully you run into them at some other point, whether it's at the arena or at a park or something like that. Yeah, all the other comments I think are really positive so far.
That's a great one. Thank you.
Yes, through the mayor. Thank you. So I think for building community life, I agree that we need more commercial and small business opportunities for people. And because if you live in the community and you work in the community, you feel more like a community rather than a better community. So I think John mentioned that too. So I think that's really important. The other thing that's important to me, I think, is in all of our villages, is we really do have to slow people down and or I know with us, what makes it complicated is we got county roads going through our villages and they want to move traffic and you want to slow them down. And I think it's important because if you go to a community where you got to kind of go slow and you're looking at storefronts or parks, you know, it's easy to, or easier to slow people down rather than travel through. So anyway, that's a couple of things that I like to see us work on and keeping the villages we have all small and create more small businesses. Because if you live in the village, then you can work in the village. That's a bonus.
Good points, thanks.
So the second thing you have is economy. I think we've kind of touched on a few and just in my notes, so I've got like Councillor
Yep.
said too, we're looking at jobs and working in the community, and that was something that Michael mentioned too about and Deputy Mayor John mentioned about the industrial park and having a place for businesses to come, and offshoot of that, of course, is tax diversification or tax base. And I think through ag, there was ag tourism and all this, your comments about farm gate sales and different way, Councillor Silva's, Derek's comments about the farmers markets, both in Ilderton as well. Oh, and I'm kind of reacting to that big box thing and small box thing too, is I think if we have a place where businesses can go, we have spots that are vacant in the community. Local businesses aren't jumping into those because a lot of the local businesses are sole proprietorships or sole business people. And their comment is they can't afford those places and they're not really, I guess it's more of a gig economy kind of job as opposed to a business. And I don't want to get into semantics of that. I think you know what I mean. It's not like they've got employees or require storefronts, internet to get their job done. So anyways, there's a whole bunch there. I'm going to start again on this side and we'll just go around the horseshoe and everybody can jump in and make comments about economic development and all those pieces. Go ahead.
Mayor, I think my biggest concern is, and I don't know if we'll ever lose this, is the bedroom community. I don't know how we're going to lose that concept. Probably Ilderton more than anybody right now. It's just too easy if you're coming out of London, where a lot of people do work, and I don't know, like, I hate to think of percentages. A lot of London's have Loblaws there. They've Masonville Mall to get, like small grocery stores and that. Where in Ilderton, there's nothing there. So how do we get the people in Ilderton to buy in Ilderton? Like, sort of putting a food land up as Logan's got, barber shops, stuff like this. I guess the problem is they live out here, like Jack's out here, but they spend their money in in London. The majority of them do work in London. So how do we get away from that concept?
Yeah, that's we heard quite a bit about that actually. To say, is there? I mean, people recognizing that it's about the market forces and London's there. Is there some sort of magic threshold, population-wise, for example? People would say, okay, now at this point we have the market in Ilderton to support a grocery store, and the questions that we couldn't answer, obviously. But your point's a good one.
Through your mayor, one of the problems we have for small businesses, where can I run my small business? There's no zoning for it. And I know it's been discussed that if we had a small business park, maybe you could have a group of them. And like I said, you got to create internally. And for a lot of those businesses, there is nowhere properly zoned for them to go. A lot of them find out they're not supposed to be where they are. So I think that's the issue to address.
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge again is bringing the bigger commercial businesses to Middlesex Center. We've got a spot in Ilderton right in the downtown core, but the landowner is very reluctant to let it develop or try to develop it. And that would be the perfect spot in Ilderton for a grocery store. And with the grocery store, that attracts other businesses in that center hub there. But again, we don't own the property. We can't get our hands on the property. The owner is reluctant to do anything. So we're seeing some development along London Drive, but again, the problem is the it's a county road, the traffic speeds and volume are huge. And so it makes it difficult for people in the community to get there other than by vehicle. And I think that affects the economy because if you had more people walking, more small business be able to develop there. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My turn. To build on what Councilor Arts and what Deputy Mayor Brennan said, I think we should not lose sight of the fact that Glendon Drive will be changed. Should be changed over the next 2 years. Lower speed limit, median in the middle. Yes, more lanes, but pedestrian walkways on both sides, multi-use paths on both sides. If Stantec's, final recommendations are taken through, and I liked most of them. I think zoning is actually a really big problem. I've been looking at zoning for other municipalities lately for a variety of reasons, and they are, in some cases, and mostly for the better, far more permissive than ours. Whether they have a wider variety of them or whether similar zones, like we've got an A1 and they've got an AG1, we have an A2 and they have an AG2, right? They're aligned roughly. They're far more permissive. And like I said, mostly for the better. So for our official plan, I think we need to take a hard look at how to make that easier for people. We do have some smaller businesses moving into the Foodland Plaza. I forget what it's called right now, but but we've got a Pet Value moving in there. It's a chain, but I'm pretty sure they're all locally franchised, owned, maybe, and some other small businesses. And yes, it is competing with two others. And there is supposed to be more commercial buildings along Glendon Drive coming as part of the Kilworth Heights West subdivision. So, what the makeup of those and how much they cost and all that, we have zero control over, or very little control over certainly the cost, but even the makeup. Opportunities are coming, but we need to make sure they're the right opportunities. And even, I think it's fine that we've prohibited things like retail out of somebody's house so far, but where we can make changes to be a little bit more permissive and make things a little bit easier for somebody to grow in place and then make that jump to an office or retail or what have you at a more appropriate time, I think we should make an effort to do that. And internet, because reasons.
Yeah. We certainly heard a lot about that.
Go ahead. All right, that's somebody else is speaking. Anyway, yeah, I think for economically, the whole COVID this year has really changed a lot of things. And I think Middlesex centers, I think we can set ourselves up to be in a good position to get more small businesses. I mean, I see small deliveries coming back, people looking for, and those small businesses that can do that are way more easier, to do than big box. Big box is, I don't know if I'd want to be one now, you know what I mean? I mean, they're going to survive because they always seem to, but the small business opportunities for us is good because of what's happened this year. I mean, I've recognized the change where people are wanting to go to, like Derek says, the Kamoka, they go to the Saturday morning market, and people are really thinking that way now. And I think they're going to keep thinking that way going forward because it doesn't look like things are changing too fast on the COVID front. So.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just quickly add to that, Your Worship, that's a very good point. And we did hear from particularly from the Ilderton business community, exactly that their experience during the spring and summer of this COVID crisis generally was an uptick in business. They were really quite positive in that regard, and certainly would be, just as you suggested, something to build on. They say every good consultant's study makes recommendations for another consultant study. But quite a bit of this conversation has been around the notion of economic development. And I know Kara and the team at the county are doing a marvelous job. but perhaps now might be the time to consider moving forward with a Maiden Middlesex Center Economic Development program to capture that opportunity and seize upon that sentiment.
Okay, thank you. The next one I have here is infrastructure and services. Maybe I'll start over on this side for change. Do you want to comment on infrastructure and services, Brad, or do you want me just to say a few things and give you a moment to think? Okay, so when I think of infrastructure and services, for me, infrastructure, things like our asset management plan and programs that we have to make sure that we're delivering the right thing at the right time to the right people. For me, one of the key foundational blocks for all of this is sustainability. Doesn't matter what we want to do, in some world, we need to be practical about it. So for me, sustainability is supported by things like an asset management plan that says, if we know what we've got to do when, then we've got a plan and we can match the finances, and then we don't have peaks and valleys in our taxes and things like that. So I'll think of something else, but have you now had a chance to gather your thoughts, and we'll come back around the table the other way.
Infrastructure, yeah, I think it's always going to be a challenge, especially the way we're spread out so wide. So we're trying to produce infrastructure in North and Coca, which is way easier. And then when you get to Ilderton and Delaware, it's like, that's complicated. So I think our concentration has to be doing it in small leaps in those areas and trying to keep it affordable. Of course, the internet, you hear anybody can have anything. That's the one we can put in every small village. So
Well, I think for the most part, this is really we need to focus on nuts and bolts type thing. The roads need to be maintained. We will see later the results of the budget survey, where the vast majority of residents said either they wanted to see public works and engineering spending maintained or enhanced. A fairly large segment enhanced, which I guess depending on where you live is a little surprising. But so certainly we need to keep up with that. And I think I've already mentioned, but I'll say it again here specifically, is that the amount of infrastructure we have to enable active transportation, that being walking, cycling, scooter, et cetera, is at least between our communities is certainly lacking. That's not something we can solve everywhere, but I think where we can make it easier for people to get around without a vehicle, we certainly need to look at those things. We've made, well, I guess we didn't make the stride, but we did allow for a bus stop at the wellness center recently, that pilot project between Sarnia and London. So, that was a no-brainer. I don't know how heavily we promoted it, but it is up and running, I believe, and it's fairly affordable. And that's an example of something that, while it's not, every hour, every half hour transit, it's certainly a nice service we can offer. Beyond that, I think we've been doing all the right things in terms of making capital investments in order to reduce our operating expenditures, like connecting Delaware and Kamoka/Hillworth's water supply together, which I think is almost done. And expanding services when needed, as opposed to spending a lot of money in advance in anticipation of things happening. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Good. Yeah, thank you.
I don't have a lot to add to that. I think as far as the infrastructure goes and the services we provide to our residents, I think we're doing a pretty decent job there. So I don't have a lot to add there.
First, I need clarification. When I said a business park, I meant trades, like from previous conversation, like an electrician, a car dealing place, maybe a small machine shop. That's what I meant by small business park. And as for services, I think we do a reasonable job, but people have to remember too that they come out here for the country experience or the small town experience. So maybe you're not going to get everything you get in the big city. That's just the way it is.
Just harkening back on your comment about the trades, and that's I think certainly, Murray, what we heard is light industry trades, just allowing small things to spring up and flourish. Yeah, that's why that's consistent, I think, with what we were hearing.
Just a comment on the services. I think sometimes we lose touch with reality here. Sometimes is that we get a new subdivision in, and our directors come to us and say, "Well, we need another lawnmower." Well, why do you need another lawnmower? Well, we have our park now. Or the roads guys come back in our plow truck, or another sander, salty sander. I think we got to keep that in mind when we do subdivisions and agreements and that, and development down the road. We need to be prepared. It's going to cost a lot more than the service end of it. It's cost us right now. We just sometimes lose touch with that.
Sorry about that. I've actually missed one counselor. Debbie, do you want to jump in and make comments on community life, land use, economy, infrastructure services as you've been listening?
Yeah, I can. I was impressed with the list that's already been made. And I do agree that community life, as we've heard a lot, people like the small town feel. But I wonder if they look at it through rose-colored lenses. It's not the same as the city. And for some of us, you know, in the community life part, a lot of it has to do with volunteers. And some of those, although we are getting newer people volunteering, a lot of the core people that are on these volunteers, such as the Lions and the Illusion Fair and the Optimists, have been here years and years. So it's a different outlook. But I do think that that's a good place for people to get involved, is in the volunteer committees, rather than speaking about stuff through Facebook. And the economy, I wanted to make a note that I think it was already mentioned. Yes, it was mentioned about changes brought about by COVID. And actually, in Ilderton, for example, I think the market has picked up, as was mentioned about Kamoka. And I think business has also picked up, again, because now people are walking more than they used to. They used to just drive in and out, as was mentioned by, I think, the deputy mayor or somebody. And now they were looking around more, which is great, because then they saw the market and they saw some of the businesses and patronized them, which is excellent. And it's too bad that it took a COVID pandemic to get people to know their own community. And the infrastructure, I think we're pretty good there. Again, like, I know some of the people want roads paved and some want them left. And I've heard from on both sides that people that get their gravel roads paved are not happy because now traffic picks up. So you can't win there, but I think we're pretty good on the infrastructure and services. So that's all.
Can I just pop in to say that I think the roads is a good example. The Oldtown Arena is another example, and I'm sure that you have others in mind where that, back to the mayor's first point about the asset management plan. I mean, at what point can these things be justified, and what the plan, the development charges study, of course, deals with that same sort of issue. At what point will things be funded, and will the need be justified? So I think you're probably well within your rights to say that you've done a great job of making sure that you do anticipate when the next step, if you like, will be required.
Debbie, did you want to comment on government? We're just going to start with that one now. That would be government and how we work or should work.
I think we have a good staff and I think we have a good council right now. And so I think we work well together. And I think, I don't know, like you learn a lot of stuff from being a counselor or to get involved. And like really our staff are experienced and they know what to do and they know all the provincial rules that they have to abide by. And we're learning that and we pick it up, but you sort of know where you stop. I think we have some good committees, but I think we should, if possible, it'd be nice to have a little bit more involvement with community members again. To get on, I don't know what other committee we would have, but to get advice from the community more.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just jump in then. The only things that I had on my list there were, as you said, I think we're in a good place in terms of staffing and council and how we work and so even in terms of vision. And I think we have good conversations about where we ought to be and that kind of thing. So that I don't know how strategic, that isn't even that strategic actually. For me, some of the emphasis, again, it comes back to sustainability. I think we need to make sure our finances can support the kinds of things we're doing. Having said that, what are the implications of COVID? Obviously, is that this whole thrust from the provincial government about modernization, which has been sort of hanging over our heads, the importance of how we do work and modernizing our processes and leveraging all of the electronic and efficiency pieces that we can. I think we need to continue to do that. We're already looking at things like extended hours so we can serve the community better. We offer more channels, if you will, for contact already. So I think there's a lot going on. We have now a couple of people on staff too that really make it obvious that we need to do some things differently and better and keep an eye on. So communications, obviously we have a new person now and I can see changes in terms of what gets said to people, how quickly, how frequently, all of those, like that's to me invaluable. It makes counselors, my life more, it's easier for us to be on message and make sure we've got our facts and we can communicate properly with people. So say, cloud permit and stuff like that. Those kinds of things are no-brainers for me. So that was the only thing I could add. Which way do we want to go this time? Do you want to start, Hugh? This time we'll go to Wayne and then we'll jump over to John. Go ahead. Do you have anything you want to add in on government, how we work?
I guess I'm kind of new at this, so it's been a serious learning curve. And every time I think I got it all figured out, I do something stupid. So as long as you can admit your mistakes, and nobody's perfect, it's a process that we all go through. Thanks.
I guess I'm one of the fortunate counselors. I sat on the other side of the table. I was fire chief Middlesex Center, and now I'm counselor for Middlesex Center. So I see both sides of it. As counselor, I see that there is more department than just the fire department, as much as I like to admit there was. But you see the whole group of people, and I think we actually, as council and staff, do a great job here. Thank you.
I think I've been around a while, so I think where we're at now probably is the best I've seen in my tenure as a counselor and deputy mayor. And I've been here probably 15 or 16 years or something like that. So I think where we're at now, I think as far as our municipality goes, our leadership, both staff and council, our two leaders there, are doing a fantastic job in communicating to people and moving the municipality forward. So I think that's huge. And as I say, in my time here, I think we're in the best place I've seen us be at. But
I mean, we can always do more, but there's certainly a lot of diminishing returns that we hit at some point. And I think with the level of engagement we have on Facebook, on Twitter, with the amount of communication that goes out, the newsletter that goes out, the fact that we are now live streaming every meeting, not just the ones we were doing from home during the pandemic. You'll get it one day, Ina. Don't worry. You'll hit your mic first thing this morning. You know, we've caught up with a lot of bigger cities who have much larger budgets and way more staff to do all the exact same things we're doing, or at least the majority of what we're doing. And I would like to think we're way ahead of the pack at similarly sized and staffed municipal governments. So I don't have any strong, like, we need to do this now type of things right now. Right now, live streaming is my big one. I got it. And at least for now, I'm pretty satisfied with where we're at.
I think for the younger generation, the digital world is good. Cloud permits, anything we can do. Our website, it's awesome to be able to find information. But I really believe we gotta have somebody answer the phone in human. You know what I mean? The answer machine. I think it's important that you got one person. We should continue to do that because there's nothing like getting guided by somebody. You know, how do I get a hold of your CAO? Oh, this, you know, and so I think that's important to keep going for not just the older generation, but even some of the younger. That balance. I think customer service, because I think of us kind of as a business for the residents, right? And so customer service people sometimes don't get great customer service. So as far as Middlesex Center, I believe we're good, but I think we can always do better. And it's hard to police people all the time, but we should do our best to do that. So answer the phone live.
Great note to end our.
Could I just pipe in with a few comments? One of the things that sometimes it's hard to recognize is the things we didn't hear. And I think Murray and I would agree that we heard, and as I've done, you know, the same sort of process in other municipalities, we heard almost nothing about council, which I think you should take as a vote of confidence, because certainly if there was, you know, if there had been qualms or questions, we would have heard about it. And as polite as people were, I think we would still have heard about it. The second point that confirms that, I guess, is that people are never really going to say they're absolutely delighted with their taxes, but on the survey questions, which talked about, you know, how do you feel you're getting value for your taxes? It was somewhere between good and fair, which is you know, again, all things considered, pretty much a vote of confidence, and I think deserves some congratulations. I guess the last comment I'd make is that I'm just afraid that poor old Heather there, her ears are going to be burning right off her head with all the complimentary comments that she's just received.
Your Worship, if I could just add a note, you know, there's a great deal of value in exercises like this in reinforcing the positive, reinforcing the fact that in terms of governance and administrative practices, that you have a formidable team in place now. You have a united council, and you are chasing after leading and cutting edge administrative practices and engagement. Always room for improvement. I heard someone say not too long ago that no such thing as a best practice. We're always chasing better practices. But you're certainly an example, and as Bill noted, that, you know, the survey results and our engagement reflect the fact that there's much to be celebrated in terms of governance in Middlesex Center, and we don't have to, you know, we don't have to grope to think, well, I've got to say something, I've got to come up with something here, when you're really on a very positive track, pushing things up to the finishing line. We did hear from the senior management team some specific ideas for administrative, sort of procedural and policy areas, and we'll be following those up. And you'll be hearing about those, all progressive, all building on the success that you're seeing and the great results you're seeing now. So, you know, it really, this is an opportunity to celebrate the great work that your teams are doing.
Well, thank you for that. And I think council supports our staff in looking forward and coming up with ideas. We don't do everything right away. And I think a measured kind of approach is what we're trying to do. So, but I say the forward-looking piece, I think, is one of the characteristics of the council. So Now, I'm cognizant of the time, and I know there are a few more slides here, so I want to make sure you have time to lay out the next steps and finish off the presentation, if you'd like.
Yep. Let's just take about 10 minutes if we can to again, perhaps going around the table. The next step, and we've got a lot of that in the comments you've already made, and we thank you for that, as to specific kinds of initiatives that might help to get us where we want to go on a number of these strategic directions. The next slide, please, Marie. One of the things which we don't want to lose sight of is a number of time horizons. So perhaps in the next 10 minutes or so, if there are things that, we tend to concentrate on the middle bunch here, things we can do kind of now, within the next 5 years, and it will be done, and congratulations, well deserved. On the other hand, there are things, perhaps there are holdovers or there are implications from previous actions taken that need to be borne in mind. And the comments from the council member about the changes coming to Glendon Drive, an example of that. Ongoing initiatives to say, well, we're already doing something which is going to get us a long way ahead on some of the things we want to achieve. And let's not forget about that, because they continue to consume time and money. I think that's the criterion to use. Are they consuming time and money still? Then let's make sure that they're working in the direction that solving a problem that you've identified, then let's make sure we don't forget them. And then similarly, there are some things which, we're probably not going to tackle that in the next 5 years, but maybe we can make a start on it. Maybe there's a study, or maybe there's a reserve fund, or there's at least an acknowledgement to say that there are some things we want to make sure are reflected in our strategy, even though perhaps we don't have a specific initiative that will take place within the next 4 or 5 years. So maybe if we can. I think the easy part of the things in the middle, but those things on either end, if we can go around the table again, are there some things there that you want to make sure we don't lose track of? And again, we're going to go back to the same 4 themes just for the sake of simplicity. If there's anything in this theme of community life and land use, to say let's not lose track of the fact that we have implications from the past, or we have things in the further distant future that we want to make sure are recognized.
So just to be clear, then we're going to stick to that one topic, and I'll ask people then to comment on the number one thing that we shouldn't lose track of for that one, and then we'll move to the next one.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to open it up then, because I know there was overlap before. Community life and land use. What do we need to not lose track of? I think the one you mentioned was, Councillor Silva mentioned Glendon Drive. That EA happened already. We know what the vision is there. We know what's going to happen. That's going to keep on rolling. Yeah, it's probably going to be another decade before it's completely executed in terms of sidewalks, trees, flowers, and I don't know, bicycle stands and the whole thing. So is there anything else that we need to add? Go ahead.
The official plan is also looking at existing settlement area boundaries, is it not? So that's happening right now, and certainly fits in with this. Do we put a hard line? Where do we put that hard line? Where do we encroach in terms of expanding or not the existing settlement area boundaries and all that?
Oh, that's part of the process. And those plans now are, the government extended the term a few years back. It's like a decade plan. So that'll be laying the land out for us. Exactly.
Yeah, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Thank you.
Guiding document. Anything else? I see shaking of heads.
Okay. All right. We can move on to the next then about the local economy. Are there, as you say, either actions which are ongoing that are going to make the kind of difference you're looking for? Are there things which, maybe not the next 5 years, but you want to perhaps set a stage, or at least continue to recognize things that will happen beyond 2025?
Well, 5 years, I mean, hopefully in the next 5 years, we'd like a place to have that business park, or a place for people to set up shop and not worry about zoning bylaw infractions. Go ahead, Councillor.
And try to have an open dialogue with developers where they are building office, commercial space about maybe things they can do to make it more accessible to the types of businesses who are having a hard time finding space right now and being located there.
Yeah, I think it's a domino thing, isn't it? I mean, there's a critical mass. We've got a foodland now.
Yes, exactly.
Critical mass, we're going to have a complex.
I neglected to earlier, but I was going to mention, part of what Ilderton lacks is enough population to support maybe the food town Kamoka had before, but that was fairly small and selection was limited. But we hit that point where Foodland made sense, and I'm sure it's not just people from Kamoka who are going there. They're from Delaware, they're from Ilderton, they're from Coldstream, they're from London. I've met some Londoners this year in lines because they like it. They like the size, they like the selection. It's different from what they have, and they don't have to go to Remark to get some stuff.
And both Foodland and LCBO took a flyer on it. Both of them know that they're not getting the business that they should be getting that justifies either of those in that spot right now, but they recognize that to be established, and it's a virtuous cycle. Once we have this and so on.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so those,
Okay. All right.
Debbie, jump if you have anything you were missing. I hear nothing right now, so we'll pick it up if there's something that.
Okay.
Okay.
And the next one's infrastructure and services. If there's anything that's on the go that we want to make sure we recognize as consuming time and money,
Sorry.
which can't be done in 5 years.
I'm not sure where this fits in, but we have these new subdivisions go in and they start to have issues with flooded basements and stuff like that. And then once the developers got that subdivision done, we inherit the problem. So I think we have to be more vigilant on water drainage or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, things aren't working the way they should from a subdivision. And like you said, down the road, that becomes our problem. I'd rather get it fixed before it is.
Okay, good one. Okay.
Anything else? I don't see anything or hear anything. Oh, sorry, Councillor Silva, do you have something to add?
I was going to talk about supporting SWIFT, but that's really a county thing, and honestly, I'm not impressed. Actually, I'll go back to street design and I guess more of a holistic approach and working collaboratively with developers on making sure it's not just adequate, but great where we can.
Yeah, and then all the new infrastructure we are a Vision Zero community here. So going forward with new builds that we can influence, that kind of conversation is logical as opposed to going back and retrofitting stuff. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Last was government.
It wouldn't hurt to mention SWIFT with the way past, because certainly it is an ongoing thing, as Maria mentioned at the beginning. It's important to people.
Yeah, control it, and neither can the county. Tune for the rest of.
Yeah. Okay, municipal government.
Titled County Update later this afternoon.
Okay.
Can you tell I'm grumpy?
One can never tell. Okay.
Oh, good. I do my best some days. Other days.
Okay.
Okay. And how? I think we just covered that.
Yeah. No, I think we've a lot of the comments previously were about changes already made that are paying off. So that's perfect. All right. Good. Thank you very much for that. I think we have what we need. Murray's going to just describe the next steps, and we'll have I think, a very productive morning. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Just to wrap this up, discussion and next steps, as we've outlined in our program, we're going to go away from today with a mission to develop a broad set of goals, and we're going to refine the input that we've taken in during this meeting, both in terms of the themes and the strategic directions, and then distill some of those down into some of the strategic priorities that we've just finished talking about. And also really on that note, I would encourage you, if you're anything like me, you're going to think of something immediately after we finish this segment of your meeting. And, you know, this is an ongoing, fluid, organic kind of process. And please, please do share any additional thoughts that you have, particularly on things you'd like to do, the icing on the cake, based on our conversations, and anything else you can think of. So we will work on preparing that list of directions. We'll work with your CAO and the team, and begin to sketch out a draft shopping list of things to do. We'll prepare it in a form where it can be posted, and to guide our re-engagement with the stakeholders and the community groups to test what we're going to be producing. And that will lead us down the path to the third workshop with council to report on those results, to what we think we heard and what we hear from the re-engagement process, and proceed along the timeline as Bill outlined earlier in the session. So I guess my final comments would be thank you so much for your patience in bearing with us. I think it's been an extremely productive time. Both Bill and I'm sure I can say this, would have much preferred to be in a room with you so we can make direct eye contact. But we're most appreciative of Mike and Heather, particularly for her stoic management of the process here. And we will be communicating with you further. And again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been enlightening, and we appreciate all the effort that you've done in terms of reaching out to residents and doing the probing and discussing and pulling together all of the ideas, content. There's a lot to say. I was going through all the different documents, but just one thing or just 3 words, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. Just so you know, I too have heard favorable comments and nice feedback about the sessions from people who have attended. There are also some that haven't attended that thought they might be. I think you mentioned you might be reaching out to others, so I'll probably reassure them that you will be reaching out at some point just to have a little conversation. But in any case, I think one always worries that people won't participate. I think one of the clues that this was a timely exercise, and it was done the right way in terms of reaching out to people and getting people engaged, i.e. stakeholder groups in person and surveys and informal surveys and all the channels that we had. So I think that was great, and I appreciate everything you've done, and I find nuggets as I read through. So I think this is a really useful exercise, and especially for council too, because it gives us an idea of what people are saying when they're not talking to us. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship.
So I don't have to take any action on this. We've got just a couple of business things here. Should we go till 12? Or do we? Yeah, do we want to do the consent agenda then? Yeah, okay. So we'll start off with then the adoption of the minutes of the September 9th council meeting. The resolution before us is that the minutes of the meeting held on that date from Middlesex Centre be adopted as printed. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scott and Councillor Silva. All in favor? See everybody here. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. We have items 1 through 10 here. Is there anything on any item that we would want to discuss before? I'll take Councillor Silva, then Deputy Mayor Brennan. And
thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not normally the one to raise questions about the fire engines and all that. Just a couple of other councillors who do. But I do have a question for the chief, if he's available, on the items removed from the truck. in order to get it a little bit closer to the budget. What, from a practical perspective, what sort of impact will that have on the operations of this apparatus and for the firefighters?
If I could just jump in, I've got a little add-on on that. While you're answering that, my question on that is, to the extent that the operations aren't as effective or smooth or whatever, what would it cost, given the timelines involved here too, what kind of timeline would we be looking at to put those additional items on down the road if they're needed, and at what cost differential?
Through you, Mayor, to answer these questions, Councillor Silva, to you first. Impact on the removed items would be negligible. Ultimately, it would be preferable if we would keep everything that we did have. However, these items can be removed without major issue. Timeline wise to you, Mayor, a lot of these things we do have already and can be switched around from truck to truck. There are some things such as the deluge 4-inch to 3-inch piping that, again, isn't really required at this time. To put it on later, cost-wise, it probably wouldn't be much different. The other things such as, example, a door drip trays, that would be something that would need a complete redesign of the actual roll door. So it's not really a required item, but those are things we really wouldn't want to consider putting on after the fact.
Has your question been answered, Councillor Silva? Okay. Any comments on what we've just heard? Deputy Mayor Brennan?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what I'm seeing being pulled, I think the chief has gone to a standardized truck that can be moved from station to station. And I think these add-ons go beyond what the standard truck is he was trying to promote. So I think removing these are keeping in line with a standard truck that he's promoting for the municipality that can move from station to station, and there's no difference between those trucks. So I'm comfortable with these being removed.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see anything. I guess my comment is too then that, my comment is that this is an operational thing. I just want to be assured that we weren't jeopardizing health and safety or residents' safety as well, and that if the chief thinks that we can do without this, that I'm fine with it. But go ahead, Councillor.
Through your Mayor to Colin, so just for clarity, when we approve this consent agenda, we're approving the deductions off, correct? Okay. And
yes, we are. That's right.
That is correct.
Okay, so, and was there another question? Yes. No, that yours was on something else. Oh, okay. Well, we'll finish. I'll take Deputy Mayor, and then we'll go back to Councillor Silva.
Through you to Rob, on his tenders for load and haul of granular A, 35,000 tons for one at 162,500, and the other one is for 15,000 metric tons of granular A for 229,000. That's like 50 or 60,000 tons less for the one contract, but it's like, or it's 20,000 tons less, but it's like $50,000 or $60,000 more. I wondered where the justification for that's coming from.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor, and I apologize, Deputy Mayor. As I was transitioned over, I kind of missed a section of what you said, but I think I got enough of it. So the two tenders are different. One is a supply and apply, and that one is we're actually supplying the aggregate that's going to be applied. So that's a cheaper rate because the contractor is actually only doing the hauling from our pit and applying it to the roads. The other one is sorry, that was the load and haul. The supply and apply is the one where we're actually purchasing the aggregate, from the contractor, and they're also applying it. So that's the area in the southwest portion of the municipality, where it's just because of the further distance, it doesn't make sense to haul from our pit to apply in that area. So we did look at the rate. So if we look at the difference in the cost, we compared to what we've seen previously for per ton hauling, and the difference does equate. So it is in line.
Okay, that's clear. Councillor Silva?
Same reports, different question. Typically, we see, what the budgeted amount was and how this compares to both of these particular supply and apply and the load and haul granular results. Do they come in within the budget for this sort of thing?
Yeah, so they both fall within the budget for loose top on our roads. It's merged into one budget because it's both has to do with loose top maintenance, but it does fall within the budget.
Thank you very much, Rob. Councillor Arts, please.
This is on something different. Okay. Through your mayor, this question is for Tiffany. Property tax registration process will resume September 11th. I believe that's where we can put a lien on a property, but I just wanted clarification.
Through you, Mayor DeVete. So yes, as of September 11th, the province has lifted the freeze on property tax registrations. That's that process where if a residence or farm, commercial, anyone with a tax count has not paid for over 2 years, then the municipality can begin the tax registration process, which is about a year in length. And after that process, should the taxes remain unpaid, that the property could be sold by the municipality to recoup those taxes owing. And it was frozen during the COVID-19 pandemic, and this was lifted by the province. The municipality will proceed with the files. All of the files that are part of this were in this situation before COVID-19 hit, and they have now continued.
Okay, Councillor Shipley?
Through the mayor to Tiffany, just for clarification, Tiffany, we can't do anything for 3 years, is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually 2 years now. The province changed that a few years ago, but it's 2 years in arrears. And then technically you're right, with the third year, that's the process. So during that, there's certain notices that have to go out, and that would make up that third year before the municipality can look into or sell the property to recoup those unpaid property taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, then the motion before us is that items 6.1 through 610 found under the consent agenda for September 23rd, 2020 be adopted as recommended. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Silva and Deputy Mayor Brennan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. We're at 12:05, and I'm going to ask for a recess now. And we'll come back and start up with the Committee of Adjustment meeting at 1. Okay, do we have to adjourn? No, we just take a recess. Okay, make it so.